All right, good afternoon. Distinguished state, local officials, and community leaders, members, veterans, and friends of Naval Submarine Base New London, our submarine force, our Navy and Armed Forces. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Submarine Force Museum. I am Lieutenant Commander Brian Chapman, officer in charge of the storage ship Nautilus and director of the Submarine Force Museum. I'll be serving as your master of ceremonies today. Today we commemorate the 82nd anniversary of the Battle of Midway, a turning point in the Second World War and a shift in the strategic balance as the United States and the Allies battled the Empire of Japan. We also commemorate the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings at Normandy, the beginning of the end of the war with Nazi Germany. Nations go to war, but it's the nation's local communities and citizens who ensure victory, answering the call to arms, sustaining industry and livelihood, and sacrificing to support those in uniform, the families, and the war effort. The Second World War is no different than today in that regard. More than 80 years ago, the great peril was Japanese imperialism and German fascism. Defending freedom and democracy were our nation's service members, citizens, and communities. Today they still form the heartbeat and backbone of this great nation. So it is indeed fitting now to honor them and our United States of America. Please stand for the presentation of the colors by the Naval Submarine School's Silver Dolphin Color Guard.
Colors high, sir. Silver Dolphin. Attention. Carry. Colors. Ready. Cut. Forward. March. Go! Colors turn. Present. Colors.
Color guard, retire the colors.
Retire the colors high, sir. Color guard. Carry. Go. Ready. Cut. Colors. Colors turn. Forward. March.
I don't think so.
Thank you, Silver Dolphins. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. On May 29th, 1942, in the days just before the epic battle that would become known as the Battle of Midway, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief, United States Pacific Fleet, wrote to Admiral Ernest J. King, Commander-in-Chief, U.S. Fleet, and Chief of Naval Operations. He relayed, and I quote, "We are actively preparing to greet our expected visitors with the kind of reception they deserve." That reception that Admiral Nimitz spoke of, and the action of the sailors and Marines who provided it, is one of our nation's great World War II stories. The Battle of Midway was an improbable victory for our Navy. Our force was small, not battle-hardened, and stood in the face of the might of the Imperial Japanese Navy. It was the determination and courage of our sailors and Marines that turned the tide. For many years, a Battle of Midway submarine veteran was a stalwart local participant of this annual commemoration, retired Master Chief Dean Brown. While Master Chief is no longer with us, his stories and recollection of that battle live on. To tell us a little more about the battle from Master Chief Brown's perspective, please join me in welcoming Naval Submarine Base New London Command Master Chief Gary Stevenson.
Thank you. Distinguished participants, guests, I am honored to join you and recount the story of one young sailor in the Battle of Midway. In June 1942, Dean Brown from Shell City, Missouri, was a junior radioman stationed on board the USS Trout, SS-202. He had no idea that the three-day Battle of Midway, the turning point in the Pacific War, would commence on June 4th at 04:30 in the morning. He knew only that the Trout had left Pearl Harbor for Midway, with just two of the submarine's 4 engines online. Those 2 engines had suffered damages as the submarine had raced across the Pacific, supporting the famed Doolittle raids in April of 1942. For those who may not recall, the Doolittle raids were when 16 U.S. Army Air Force B-25 bombers were launched from the aircraft carrier USS Hornet deep in the western Pacific Ocean. Those bombers, led by Lieutenant Colonel James Jimmy Doolittle, conducted the first air raid by the United States to strike the Japanese home islands. So as the Trout headed towards Midway to join Submarine Task Group 7-1 and 11 other U.S. submarines, all hands worked to get Trout's other 2 engines back online. And like any dedicated crew committed to an arduous task, they were successful. And when the Trout reached Midway, all 4 engines were online. The Battle of Midway would play out as an aerial conflict more than a surface or subsurface engagement. But during the Battle of Midway, Trout continued to provide screening west of the island, and the crew had their work cut out for them. The radioman had to copy 25 words per minute of Morse code. No easy feat, according to Master Chief Brown. 3 days after the battle, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Tangy was conducting search and rescue for U.S. service members. The USS Trout found 2 Japanese sailors among the debris of the Imperial Japanese Navy heavy cruiser Mikuma. Dehydrated and badly sunburned, the Japanese radiomen and firemen 3rd class were pulled from the water and given care aboard the Trout until they could be taken to Pearl Harbor and hospitalized. Radioman Brown served on the Trout until just before it left its 11th war patrol. He was in electronics training school when Trout was declared presumed lost with all 81 hands on board, April 8th, 1945. After the war, Master Chief Brown stayed Navy and attained the ranks of Senior Chief and Master Chief. As the ranks of Senior Chief and Master Chief were created in June of 1958, he became one of the first sailors to make Master Chief without ever having attained the rank of Senior Chief. Following his naval career, Master Chief Brown joined Electric Boat for 24 years, retiring in 1987. A proud submarine veteran, he enthusiastically participated in the Submarine Veterans of World War II and Subvets organizations. His quiet dignity, robust constitution, and fierce patriotism were the bedrock of this annual event. One man's story, but our history, a history we must never forget. So today, we finally remember Master Chief Brown's service and that of his shipmates 82 years ago. They made the sacrifice that secured our nation's freedom and world peace and left an enduring legacy for us all to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Master Chief. Today we are honored to be joined by Master Chief Brown's children, his daughter Jessica and son Philip. Now I'll ask Jessica and Philip to join Master Chief Stevenson and Commander Brad Boyd, Sub-Base Executive Officer, to place a wreath. We lay these flowers in tribute of the great service and sacrifice of Master Chief Brown, our Midway veterans, and all who contributed so mightily to this American naval victory. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand. Our wreath ceremony here takes place in concert with many similar ceremonies throughout our Navy around the world. In doing so, we revere all those who have served and are serving with honor, courage, and commitment. We pause now to remember and respect the spirit of Midway in our Navy and our nation. Thank you. Please be seated. The story of Master Chief Dean Brown and all our nation's bold and courageous submariners is important and impactful. British statesman Winston Churchill wrote, "Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." To provide a brief overview of the history and lessons of the Battle of Midway, please join me in welcoming the Executive Officer of Naval Submarine Base New London, Commander Brad Boyd.
Thank you. And, pardon me, I can either see you or read the page. I can't do both. Good afternoon. Welcome one and all. First, allow me to bring you greetings from some base's 53rd Commanding Officer, Captain Kenneth M. Curtin Jr., who regrets not being able to join us as he is on travel today. Second, thank you for being here. I am pleased and thankful you are all here to commemorate this 82nd anniversary of the Battle of Midway and the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings in Normandy. On December 7, 1941, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Nazi Germany was already waging war in Europe. Our nation, much of the world, and the very ideals of freedom and democracy were in peril. The attack on Pearl Harbor thrust us from a nation on the edge of isolationism to become the world's arsenal of democracy. Communities came together as our country mobilized to meet the challenge of war, and our armed forces rushed to be both sword and shield. New tactics and strategies were pursued and developed. One result of such efforts was the cracking of the Japanese Navy's codes. With the information revealed by breaking these codes, our armed forces could attempt to counter Japanese offenses throughout the vast expanse of the Pacific. And perhaps the most dramatic illustration and execution of this was the Battle of Midway. Of course, knowing about an enemy's plan is one thing. Beating into the punch and winning the battle is another. Prevailing over the enemy would require astute leadership and operational acumen, exceptional skills from bridge to the deck plate, and a faith and confidence in each sailor and marine to do their utmost in carrying out the mission. During the Battle of Midway, our Navy and Marine Corps exercised those character traits and more. From Navy and Marine Corps leaders like Admiral Nimitz and Lieutenant Colonel Harold F. Shannon, commanding the Marine Corps garrison at Midway, to Raymond Dean Brown, stationed aboard USS Trout, our sailors and Marines made the difference at Midway, and the United States prevailed. The Japanese plan had been straightforward: to lure what remained of the American fleet after Pearl Harbor to Midway Island and destroy it, and then to invade and use the island as a base for attacking Hawaii. Our nation and Navy's response was just as forthright. On June 4th, 1942, U.S. aircraft flying from USS Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown attacked and sunk 4 Japanese carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor only 6 months before. By June 6, 1942, Admiral Yamamoto and his Japanese forces were forced to withdraw. The Battle of Midway marked the turning point of World War II in the Pacific. The U.S. victory there ended Japan's seemingly unstoppable advance. From December 7, 1941, it took some 6 months to turn the tide. To turn the tide we did at the Battle of Midway. And with that victory, we laid the foundation for the ultimate end of the World War. A cornerstone to that end marks its 80th anniversary today. June 6th is the anniversary of the most complex and largest amphibious assault in history. The 1944 Allied cross-channel invasion of the northwestern coast of France was called Operation Overlord, and the Navy element was called Operation Neptune. Today, we simply refer to it as D-Day. Its objective: to drive the German army back, contain the enemy, and end the war in Europe. As June 6, 1944 dawned, nearly 7,000 ships and landing craft delivered an Allied invasion force numbering some 150,000 to Normandy beaches. The beaches now infamous were codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Silver. The heroic efforts of those who landed and who established a foothold in Europe under withering fire and defenses are legendary. This year, I am pleased that 3 representatives of our Navy New London team will convey the stories of 3 Navy D-Day veterans. Like Master Chief Brown's story, these stories are humbling and a true testament to the honor, courage, and commitment of the young men and women who wore the uniform then and who also wear the uniform today. It has been and continues to be such service and sacrifice that allow us to gather freely and openly in a commemoration like today's. I am honored to follow in such footsteps. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Commander Boyd. Now for our first account of D-Day, please join me in welcoming Boatswain's Mate 3rd Class Cody Shrewsbury from the Subbase Port Operations Department.
This is the story of Seaman First Class Bob Watson, 6th Naval Beach Battalion. Seaman First Class Bob Watson has been drafted into the military service on August 12, 1943. He was only 18 years old when he and the others assigned to Company B of the 6th Naval Beach Battalion made an attempt to land on Omaha Beach as part of Operation Neptune. People asked me if I was in the first wave of ships, said Watson. There were no waves. All that there was were things blowing up to your left and things blowing up to your right. According to Watson, his landing craft, mechanized LCM, was making its way to the beach when it hit a mine about a mile from the shore and exploded. Dozens of men were killed instantly, and he was sent flying through the air. As I headed into the water, everything to my left was blowing up, and everything to my right was blowing up, said Watson. People often ask me what time I got there, and I tell them once I hit the water. I looked down at my watch, and it was smashed, and it stuck on 7:27 a.m., so I go with that. As a beachmaster, Watson's job was to keep the troops' material, equipment, and vehicles moving up the beach. However, Watson's did much more, including helping the Army medics, firing off rounds on the firing line, and operating a bulldozer in order to clear debris and make a road for the troops and vehicles. After spending a total of 28 days on Omaha Beach, Watson was sent back to England. His unit was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, and he was awarded 2 Purple Hearts during his World War II naval service. One man's story, but our history. A history we must never forget. Thank you.
Thank you, BM3. Now for our second account of D-Day, please join me in welcoming Hospital Corpsman Second Class Kyle Kennedy from Navy Medicine Readiness and Training Unit Groton.
This is the story of Lou H. Shear, 7th Naval Beach Battalion. Enlisting from Indiana, Hospital Corpsman Shear was 20 years old the morning of June 6, 1944. Loaded down with gear, wearing a red cross armband, and among approximately 150 men crammed aboard a landing craft infantry, or LCI, headed for Omaha Beach. As the vessel steered toward the beach, it hit 2 landmines. 18 soldiers were killed in the blast and ignited flamethrowers at the Manhattan. The forward part of the LCI became an inferno with flames 30 feet up in the air. Shear and the survivors were ordered to drop their gear, jump off the craft, and swim for it. He dropped his pack, 2 medical bags, and jumped into the water wearing 3 layers of clothing, a helmet, combat boots, and a life belt. His corpsman didn't carry a rifle. It was 100 yards away from the beach. Shear and the others swam for it. They drew enemy fire. "You could see it," he said. "To my left, here comes a pattern. About every 6 or 8 inches, a machine gun bullet would hit, coming right at us. The bullets came within a few feet of him, but for some unknown reason stopped. Soaked from the cold water, but safely on the beach, Shear had to go about his work. Although he had left his medical equipment behind, there was a ready supply of waterproof bags, morphine, and an antibiotic powder called sulfa that soldiers carried with them in a cloth pouch. As dead GIs didn't need them anymore, Shear gathered supplies from the deceased and set about patching up the living. One soldier who had suffered shrapnel wounds from knees to his chest, when Shear had finished bandaging him, he said he looked like he had been in a fight with a wildcat. Enemy artillery fire, machine guns, mortars continued to pound the beach, and Shear had to tell many of the wounded that they would be stuck there for the time being. Meanwhile, he continued to improvise. For one casualty, Shear cut up a rubber life raft with his knife and to make a makeshift blanket. He didn't coddle his patients. They were tough guys, he said. You don't talk soft. You just tell them what the facts are. As darkness fell on the first night, Shear dug a narrow slit trench about 2 feet deep and tried to sleep. He woke up in the morning, partly covered by sand that had blown into the trench by an artillery shell that had exploded nearby. It was yet another narrow escape from Shear on Omaha Beach. Shear survived the war and ultimately went back home to Indiana to join his family's brick and stone contracting business. One man's story, but our history. A history we must never forget. Thank you.
Thank you, HM2. Now for our final account of D-Day, please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Ryan Seeley, Naval Civil Engineering Corps, Construction Manager from Sub-Base Public Works Department.
This is the story of Ensign Lawrence S. Karnowski, Naval Civil Engineer Corps, CEC, Naval Combat Demolition Unit 45. Ensign Lawrence Karnowski of Tampa, Kansas, was a 1943 civil engineering graduate of the University of Kansas. He was a 28-year-old Naval CEC reservist in charge of Naval Combat Demolition Unit, or NCDU 45, for the D-Day landings. Germans had placed countless beach obstacles along the French coast to prevent landing craft and tanks from safely coming ashore. Impediments ranged from steel tetrahedrons nicknamed hedgehogs, to wooden posts with landmines attached. NCDUs with augments of Army Combat Engineer detachments were given the mission of clearing Utah and Omaha beaches. The NCDU would handle seaward obstructions while the larger Army Engineer Force would clear the landward obstacles. Boarding landing craft mechanized, or LCM, in the early hours of June 6th, Ensign Karnowski and the sailors and soldiers of NCDU 45 sighted their assigned beach sector and headed for shore. They landed 8 minutes ahead of schedule at 0625 hours on the Omaha beach sector, codenamed Easy Red. Disembarking, Ensign Karnowski led his team in placing small satchel charges on the obstacles in the water. With minimal enemy resistance, they successfully blew up a 100-yard line of obstacles at 0650. Almost immediately after this first detonation, German machine guns and artillery zeroed in on the group from the bluffs above. Refusing to remain pinned down, Chief Carpenter's mate Conrad C. Millis of Corona, California, grabbed a roll of primacord and sprinted from obstacle to obstacle, placing and wiring charges before being cut down. Machinist mate Second Class Lester J. Myers of Freeport, Illinois, raced out to the chief's body and continued his deadly work for a second detonation. As American infantry waded past the NCDU men, Gunner's mate First Class Gail B. Fant of Minter City, Mississippi, took a machine gun round through his leg and then a piece of shrapnel wounded Myers. Another unit member, Brooklyn native Gunner's mate Third Class Robert L. Svensson, carried GM-1 Fant on his back to the dune line as Ensign Karnowski waded out and rescued another wounded unit member, carrying him to higher ground. At 0700, thanks to Mills' sacrifice and Myers' quick actions, Ensign Karnowski's men completed their second detonation and cleared enough obstacles for the Army Engineer Detachment to begin. The Army Engineers completed their first detonation at 0710 and a second shortly thereafter. Almost the entire assigned 50-yard gap of steel hedgehogs from the surf to the dunes had been cleared. By now, Ensign Karnowski and First Lieutenant Joseph J. Gregory of Elko, Nevada, commanding the Army Engineer Force, stood in the water up to their knees in the rising tide. For the last few obstacles in the gap, the officers swam out and together cleared the remaining obstructions one charge at a time. With the gap open, landing craft infantry moved in to unload fresh troops. Ensign Karnowski and First Lieutenant Gregory rounded up the remaining Navy and Army personnel and led them to the dunes for protection from the increased shelling. A short time later, a shell burst, fatally wounded First Lieutenant Gregory. Returning to his men, Ensign Karnowski learned 4 of his assigned Army personnel had sustained shrapnel injuries. Exhausted, the ensign dug foxholes for his wounded while members of the 16th and 116th Regimental Combat Team's 1st Infantry Division began to assault the bluffs overlooking Easy Red. By 0930, German resistance had been cleared. For his intrepid actions on June 6, 1944, Ensign Karnowski was awarded the Navy Cross, the first CEC officer to receive the medal for actions in Europe, and the French Croix de Guerre with Conn. For his heroism that morning, Myers received a Silver Star. The entire NCDU component received one of the 3 Presidential Unit citations awarded to the Navy for D-Day. One man's story, but our history, a history we must never forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant. As a nation, we are eternally grateful to those bold and courageous service members on D-Day, and for all that have gone before us, enduring the hardship, battles, and sacrifice. So let us now honor those lost and those who survived, and those who, on the front lines or in support, helped turn the tide to victory. I'd like to call upon our Naval Submarine Base New London Commander Gene Monin Jr. to offer a prayer so that our nation and Navy may never forget. Please rise.
All who will, let us pray. Almighty God, we honor the valiant souls whose sacrifices are etched into the annals of history, a testament to unwavering courage and resolve. On those dark days amidst the tumult of war, they lit an enduring beacon of hope. We particularly recall the silent service, whose stealth and skill played a crucial role. You were there in the depths with sailors like then Junior Radioman Dean Brown as they navigated unseen perils. Their contribution was vital, their bravery unmatched. as they forged paths to victory beneath the waves. We ask your blessing upon those who served, those who fell, and those who now carry their beacon. May we honor that legacy by preserving the principles they so dearly defended, always cherishing the freedoms their heroism secured. Beneath the waves in shadows deep, their watch they kept, our peace to keep. With honor bright, they fought the fight. Now rest they well in eternal light. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. This concludes our formal ceremony for this afternoon. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and efforts today. I'd like to invite you to join two additional elements. The weather seems to have held for us, so if you'd like to join us on the brow at the stern of Nautilus with Commander Boyd, Master Chief Stevenson, and our honored guests here, we will place the wreath and some flowers into the river in commemoration of Master Chief Brown. In addition, at the conclusion of that, we'd invite you back into the museum to join us for some tea and cakes, and a tour of the Museum of Nautilus, of course. So thank you and have a great day.
Careful. The Americans brainwashed you. Really good people.
Okay. See why I stood here?
That's really,
Great.
My dad. USS Nevada, which was launched. So he just joined the submarine service now. Very important. Everything else is that's it, my last name.
I'm in World War II. And so humble.
Ceremonies like this are very
Yeah, Phil's fine. Yeah, sister is Jessica. Jessie. Holded. H-O-A-D-L-E-Y.
Well, he was very young.
Yep.
He didn't know where he was headed or for what reason, and they weren't told until they got there. And then he tells that it was a semicircle of submarines that
Just glad that rain stopped before it was.
it survived. His ship was lost. He was taken off to go to radar school, and his ship was lost, which was always a great disappointment to him.
Like a swim hole. I would put
I mean, the people at the Nautilus would have done.
And if he was here today, or just yeah, or his experience.
You see what?
The guy talking with the camp. It's like really.
Yeah.
this. Sometimes it really goes with my age.
All right, you got trouble with the clipboard. You know what happens? When you have a clipboard and you tell somebody.
Sethy, I'm fine.
How long are you going to be here? Oh, wow, that's great. important battle.
Picture
My
the
lord.